If you ask today's moviegoers to name the greatest films of all time, you'd expect them to come up with a list which would include modern hits like Star Wars, The Godfather and Schindler's List, alongside perennial old favourites like Casablanca and It's a Wonderful Life, and of course Citizen Kane. What you might not expect is that snuggled in amidst those accepted gems, there's a very strong likelihood that you'd also find a low-key, old-fashioned, prison-bound melodrama which failed to set the world alight when it first opened in the mid-90s, which garnered only muted critical applause despite an impressive array of Oscar nominations, and which only really found its true worldwide audience thanks to the miracle of home video. It's a film which topped the Internet Movie Database poll of the 250 greatest movies ever made, which was voted by the readers of Empire magazine as better than Apocalypse Now or Battleship Potemkin, and which has been hailed by everyone from the youthful listeners of Radio 1 to the middle-aged miseries of the British monarchy and the Joe Schmo church-going congregation of the American public as a reason to keep going back to the video store. So tonight, we attempt to answer a question which has baffled critics and academics, but to which the public seem instinctively to know the answer. Just what the hell is so great about the Shawshank Redemption?
A lot of people, more than any other movie I've done, have come up to me about that movie. And it's not just, hey, I like that movie, you were really good in that movie. It's, that movie was important to me, or that's my favorite movie of all time.
It is the greatest movie I have ever seen. I watch the movie every week, and I can't help but cry every time I see them on the beach.
The ending brings a tear to my eye. And I'm 17, so as you can imagine.
I have to see the movie at least once or twice a week. If I don't see it, I feel miserable. It just
I'm a captain for Delta Airlines, and indeed a grown man. However, this movie brought me to tears.
Everywhere I go, people who have seen it react to it fondly.
This movie helped me in my bleakest
I watched the first 2 hours of that film saying to myself, I will never see anything better than this in my whole
absolute favorite
life.
moment? When he raises his face and feels the
drop
sweet
in the cinema. Everyone was spellbound.
I've gotten mail, and I still get mail from people who say, gosh, your movie got me through a really bad marriage, or a really bad divorce, or it got me through a really bad patch in my life, or it got me through a really bad illness, or it helped me hang on when a loved one died. You know, there's something about the movie that helps lend some courage to people who need it.
I guess it comes down to a simple choice, really. Get busy living, or get busy dying.
The Shawshank Redemption began life as a novella by horror guru Stephen King, published in the 1982 anthology Different Seasons, which also included The Body, filmed by Rob Reiner as Stand By Me. Originally entitled Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption, the story was a departure from scary fare like The Shining, which had made King a household name, offering instead of shivers and shocks, a fairy tale of incarceration and emancipation, in which an abused prisoner triumphs over terrible adversity by escaping into dreams of the movies, both literally and metaphorically. Describing himself as in rather than of the movie business ever since Carrie had hit the big screen in the 70s, King had famously decided that whilst Hollywood moguls could pay top whack for his novels, he would option his shorter stories to budding film students for a mere $1 on the condition that they weren't screened commercially and he retained the rights. And one student who took him up on that offer was Frank Darabont, whose adaptation of The Woman in the Room so impressed King that he reacted very enthusiastically when Darabont came back to him a few years later, looking to put together a feature deal on that quirky Rita Hayworth story.
I do recall very clearly, once upon a time, 2:30 in the morning, North Hollywood, Frank and I are in some supermarket, you know, looking at potted meat product or something, and he is considering the task of having to direct his first feature film, which was almost a Chucky film. And we're wandering up and down the aisles of the supermarket, and he's going, I don't know, do you think I should take this? You think I'll get another chance? Should I just grab this now? Should I do it? And I said, well, what else have you got on? And he said, well, I've almost finished up this adaptation of this novella by Stephen King, Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption. A more magnificently clunky title could not be imagined. And he said, I'm going to see if anybody's interested in buying it.
If I didn't care.
I think the ambition, the aspiration to direct was really something that I was born with. Making films since childhood seemed like a glorious thing to me. That's indeed where I drew a great deal of my inspiration growing up, was from the films that I saw. I love Capra. I grew up with Capra, and I grew up with Norman Rockwell. There's a part of me that is completely captivated by those kinds of storytellers who would tell those kinds of tall tales. Some of the best tall tales I've ever heard came out of Frank Capra. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is nothing if not a tall tale. It's a Wonderful Life is an even taller tale. No, you have Shawshank Redemption, which I've described really not as a prison movie, but as a sort of tall tale.
Andy came to Shawshank Prison in early 1947 for murdering his wife and the fella she was banging. On the outside, he'd been vice president of a large Portland bank. Good work for a man as young as he was.
I can see exactly why it appeals as widely as it does. A lot of it has to do with Stephen King. Whatever his problems as a prose stylist, and there aren't that many to be honest, he is a born storyteller who knows how to satisfy an audience. For some reason, that has not always worked with his movies. There are some terrible movies out there. There are some great ones like Pet Sematary and The Shining. This one is probably the purest expression of Stephen King, and that has a lot to do with it. A Stephen King book is a bestseller months before it's even published.
One thing Stephen King has always needed, insofar as the translation from the written word to movies, is an adapter that is up to the task of not losing the thing that makes King's fiction essential to so many readers. And I think he found that person, principally in Frank, because Frank is such a faithful adapter of these things. He really holds the written word in high regard.
If I didn't care.
In his introduction to Darabont's published Shawshank Redemption screenplay, Stephen King would later say that it was the kind of script that nobody could reasonably expect to be allowed to film, heavy on unfashionable substance and full of hoary old cinematic cliches which really shouldn't have worked. Nevertheless, by the time pre-production began in January 1993, everyone, King included, thought they had a script that really would deliver that rarest of commodities, hope.
Castle Rock was the first place we sent the script, and the only place we sent the script. I'd had enough experience at other studios as a writer to know how damaged this material might get. Their company actually was founded upon the success of Stand By Me, directed by Rob Reiner, and that was very delicate material that they captured perfectly.
When I read the script, I remember I got to about page 80 or 90, and I couldn't finish it because I loved it so much. I loved these people, and I was so worried it wouldn't pay off or it wouldn't be satisfying. And I remember I had it all weekend, and I didn't want to know if it didn't turn out okay.
What happened was the script got Xeroxed and went around every actor in Hollywood, and we got besieged. And that took it to a whole other level. He and I were getting calls from people, you know, at our homes, you know, on cell phones, you know. It was very bizarre. It took on a life of its own.
There were stars who were interested in it. Tom Cruise was interested in it. Nicolas Cage was interested in it. Charlie Sheen. I mean, it's like Frank had written something that was powerful and well crafted, and as soon as that hit the water, fish were moving in, right?
There must be a con like me in every prison in America. I'm the guy who can get it for you. Cigarettes, a bag of reefer, if that's your thing, a bottle of brandy to celebrate your kid's high school graduation, damn near anything within reason.
You read a script and you have a certain kind of reaction to the script. Powerful reaction in the case of the Shawshank Redemption. From reading the script, it's like, yeah, I really, really, really would like to do this.
The character was written by Steve King, was actually a white Irish guy, so I'd known the story for years as with Red as a white Irish guy in my head. When we were casting about, somebody suggested Morgan Freeman. And once I got over my preconception of what the character was, which was drawn from Steve King, it became such a good choice. And indeed, I think he's become indelible in the role to the point where I don't think people could imagine anybody else really doing it.
Name's Red.
Red. Why do they call you that?
Maybe it's because I'm Irish.
Tim, we came to because of, we looked at about 4 or 5 of his films, one of which was Jacob's Ladder, and we really thought this guy can do it. You know, he was very enigmatic, and Andy needed to have that.
He strolled like a man in a park without a care or a worry in the world. Like he had on an invisible coat that would shield him from this place.
I think that it was a sort of a love relationship between Red and Andy. It was, it did go deeper than just friendship. But you know, these things, you develop these kinds of relationships in life and death situations.
Here, little parole rejection present. Go ahead and open it. I had to go through one of your competitors. I hope you don't mind. I wanted it to be a surprise.
How many working class construction worker kind of guys have come up to me on the street and said, "That's Shawshank Redemption, man, that's a great film." Because I think especially American males, we don't get that model in films, that there is a real chance to have an emotional bond with another man that is a significant and important part of your life.
We sat and drank with the sun on our shoulders and felt like free men. Hell, we could have been tarring the roof of one of our own houses. We were the lords of all creation. As for Andy, he spent that break hunkered in the shade, a strange little smile on his face, watching us drink his beer.
I love good character actors. They're the unsung heroes of movies. And I grew up seeing so many films and loving so many of these wonderful faces and presences. Yes, the stars of the film are important, but the supporting cast is equally so.
One of the very cool things that Frank does, I mean, you watch his films and it doesn't matter which other character in the scene you watch. There's a life, there's a history and an involvement. There's something going on. You look at the dinner table scenes in Shawshank and it doesn't matter where you aim the camera. Everybody is playing that game.